Welcome to Conscious Insights, Strategies for Leadership Evolution. Engage in roundtable discussions that spark deep dialogue with executives and thought leaders to advance conscious leadership and explore innovative practices. Join us and gain insights that will elevate your leadership journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Conscious Insights, another one that I'm really excited for. I have some amazing guests, and we will be talking today about wellness at the helm, leading with vitality, and really getting into what that really means. And so I'm excited to have two guests, Renee Moorefield and Julia Schwoerer. And I'll tell you before I tell you about the guests that Renee and I were talking about the topic of well-being and wellness, which she is an expert in, and how important that is, and really important to me. And I said, what if we were to have an episode of Conscious Insights and talk about this? Who would you want to invite? Who would be the leader that you'd want to invite? She knew immediately that she wanted to invite Julia because of what she stands for and how she uses well-being as a leader and in her life. So we'll delve into that more, but let me first tell you a little bit about our two guests. So Renee Moorefield, PhD and an MCC, which is a master coach, is the CEO of Wisdom Works, a social enterprise working with global companies to bring the science and practices of human thriving to life in their work, cultures, brands, and leadership, and make thriving a new standard of success. She's also the executive director of Be Well, Lead Well, a science-based platform of assessments, culture, change resources, strategic advisory services, and education for the development of healthier, more effective leadership. Renee is on the advisory board for the wellness nonprofit Global Wellness Institute and the program advisory board for the mental health nonprofit John W. Brick Foundation. For over 3 decades, Renee has provided thought leadership and state-of-the-art resources to fuel a global movement of leaders who make thriving a priority at work, at home, and in all walks of society. And so Julia is the president of Global Bakery at Barilla Group. After several years of an international career at L'Oreal in Germany, France, and Italy, Julia joined Barilla Group in 2005 and over the years has worked in different marketing roles. Between 2012 and 2023, she has successfully developed and grown Molino Bianco, a $1 billion euro, bakery brand in Europe. In 2024, Julia moved to the new international headquarters of Barilla in Amsterdam as the president of Global Bakery, a business composed of 10 brands and 8 categories, and Julia leads a team of 55 people worldwide. Julia has a particular passion for innovation and leadership transformation and loves to learn and develop. She has participated in the Italian Women in the Boardroom program and is also a certified well-being coach and Be Well, Lead Well guide via Renee. And Julia is married and has 2 little girls and loves traveling. Discovery, empathy, and intuition are key values for her. And I love that you have your values in your bio, Julia. So welcome, Julia and Renee.
Thank you, Renelle. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, so there's a lot we can talk about, but the question I always love to ask, and particularly to you two, is a little bit more about why wellness and well-being is important to you, and then we'll get into more about what it is you all have done together and continue to do as leaders.
Julia, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think well-being or wellness is the fundamentals of living well, of being able to grow, to thrive, to have relationships, healthy relationships with people. And I think it's something that permeates life at all levels. So it's not something that you apply at work or you just apply it in your private life. It's something that really is the foundation of yourself. So I think that when someone learns to be well, then it has really a positive impact on all dimensions of life and can help you grow and flourish and thrive.
I would just build on that because I totally agree with everything Julia just said. that I believe we have this innate capacity to thrive. And we also have an innate capacity to survive and to struggle and to defend ourselves. But we have this innate capacity to thrive. We're biologically hardwired to thrive. And we often, our lives, our families, our workplaces, our societies are often don't prioritize that. And so we forget that we have this inner resource that we could be drawing on, like Julia said, to live a really fulfilled, satisfying life, to show up at work fully ourselves, to gain more energy from our work. So I think it's really important, especially at this time in our world where there's a lot of divisiveness and transformation shifts happening, acceleration of AI. There's so many things that are occurring that it's even more important for us to consider what does it mean for us to thrive individually and collectively.
I find it so interesting that when you say we forget, and I think that does happen a lot, and that's so interesting. We forget, and then by default, we're choosing to struggle. In some sense, what's your sense, both of you, of why that happens? And I'd just like to know the sense of why that happens, and then we'll get into more of the other side of things.
Well, I can say that most of us are not trained in any way in our education and our upbringing to pay attention to what enables us to thrive, to whether it's for to get rest in how we breathe and how we eat and how we move, in our sense of awe and wonder in the world. There's so many factors when we talk about thriving or well-being in a more holistic sense, but most of us aren't schooled in that in any way. And there's no one saying, hey, this is a priority for you. We have to stumble into it. So we often, what I see as a trajectory in doing this work for now 30 something years is often what happens is people get to a phase of their life where they have been working as hard as they can. They've been parenting as hard as they can. They've been doing everything as hard and as much and as best they can, but haven't ever thought, what's really going to enable us to thrive? Me to thrive as a person and us to thrive as a system until a crisis happens. Often it comes through a crisis. Maybe there's a breakdown in a relationship. Maybe there's a heart attack. Maybe there's a more identity crisis at work. And it's usually when those things happen that we go, wait a minute, I want to use this as a full pause and start to ask a different question of myself instead of following the external world, what the world is telling me about how I should live and who I should be. Instead of continuing to follow that, I'm going to ask some deeper questions of myself. So they become deeper questions of how I exist in the world and who I want to be. And those are really fundamental questions of thriving. So
I think there's one interesting thing, Renee, when you say follow, you said several times follow things. There is an autopilot that guides us. Huh? We go, and we don't stop. And normally when we are in this autopilot thing, we also tend to see always more the negative things and the negative emotions, and because our brains are wired for that, because we need it to survive, and it still is there. And it's getting out of this autopilot mode. So stop and start asking questions. That is really, I think, the turning point. And that was Renee was just describing. I completely relate to that. It's stopping the automatic way of following things without even breathing in between, and just go and supporting things. And then there's one moment where you, for one reason or another, you stop and you start asking questions. And that's super, I think it's very often very painful, but it's a gift when it happens.
Yeah, it's interesting, the following, because so many of organizations, part of how they market is to market that you need this thing to feel whole. For your well-being, you need this to feel whole, rather than helping people see you're already creative, resourceful, and whole. We know in the coaching world, Laura Whitworth had that great line in one of her books: people show up already creative, resourceful, and whole. And how can we use how can we design our systems? How can we design messages from our brands? How can we design our education so that that's what's reinforced all along the way? It's interesting that, Julia's been doing this kind of work inside Barilla for a number of years, and I've been doing it outside in global companies for a number of years. But I wish, honestly, that this is what happened in school systems with children at the earliest of ages, that is the message, because we would need to do this work.
And I have a good news here. I just moved to Amsterdam 1 year ago, and my kids are going to the international school here, and they are learning mindfulness. They are learning at a very low age. My youngest is just 6. Who they are, in what they are different. Why is it nice to be different from each other and unique? They learn about their brains and about learning and about failing and about mistaking. It's really impressive. It's a very different system, a school system versus what I had when I was a kid. But it's really precious. They really grow up with this more aware, self-aware mindset from a very, very low age. From 4 or 5 years, they already start with that.
You think about what kind of leader they will show up and be.
Yeah.
If they're 6 years old.
Right. Yeah. And I totally agree that that's where our change needs to start. I did an episode earlier in the season with a CEO of an early learning and the head of the FBI in Colorado, and going back to the systemic shifts that would really change what the FBI looked like. But I want to talk about for a second, kind of coming back to where we are today. And Julia, you're a leader within a large global corporate organization. And that's, a lot where a lot of the forgetting can happen, the autopilot can happen, where I hear sometimes, we would love to do this type of work, but we don't have the budget for that or the time. My sense is you have a different take on that. And so as, being in that environment, talk a little bit more about why this type of work, why well-being as a leader, and what your responsibility as a leader is to bring this type of work and this well-being forward within a corporation.
Yeah, for me, it's a really fundamental work that needs to be done, because there are so many shifts that are happening in the world and that are requiring companies to change very fast, to transform, to learn, to throw things away, to start completely from scratch on some ways of working, etc. And we cannot think that individuals can handle this alone, because already their private lives are full of challenges. Work, even in the old world, was challenging. Now we want everything to change in a blink of an eye. It's threatening. People feel fear. They are insecure. We need to help them. And I think that having a base of well-being in a team is the first thing that needs to be done, to then build upon it and to create a team that you can trust, and where you can also talk about the difficulties, but also celebrate the first successes of the change. I think it's not possible without that human, humans. I don't know how you can say that in English.
Yeah.
For me, it's really the ABC of transformation.
Yeah. I love that you say that, Renee and I have talked about this before, and I've got a pyramid, and the base is wellness or well-being, and then emotional intelligence. Then we get to conscious leadership. Then we get to transformed cultures. And, I think something similar in the work that you have all done together. I would just like to, when we talk about well-being, means a lot of things to a lot of people. And there's a lot out there of saying, like, some of the corporate well-being initiatives are are more lip service than they are really bringing that into the organizational life. So maybe utilizing the work that you all have done together, start like what did you do together, and how has that transformed Barilla and the team that you work with, Julia?
Yeah, we have worked actually on several projects, but let's say that the first and probably the kickoff project, the real the real pilot project was the one on my team, and that was kicked off in the times of COVID. When what we all know how it was, big confusion, big threats for the business. People were completely lost. The cohesion of the team was threatened, and I really felt I needed help. And so with Renee, we actually developed an ad hoc project. So it was not a framework that completely existed as it was. It was really tailor-made for the teammates, where we had three layers of work. The first was the work on the individual side. So every person in my team had space and time and was accompanied in working with themselves. And that was already a super precious thing, because in those moments, no one had sparring partners. No one had the tools to face what we had to face. That it was just a huge help. And many people told us in the team that just the dedicating time to yourself was already a huge gift. So there was let's say the me phase. Then we came to the team phase. So we started to put together what every single individual had learned and was questioning, and worked on what does that mean for our team? What can we do together to help each other be better and be well and work better together, despite all the difficult environment and the moment and the tension. And then there was a third layer that was, I would say, a bit of the cherry on the cake that was on the brand, because Molino Bianco stands for, has a very ambitious mission, which is to nourish the trust that the world can be a better place. And which is beautiful, but it's also a huge responsibility when you work on such a brand and the world is going in pieces, and you say, how can that brand remain relevant and meaningful in a moment where everything is falling apart? So we work as a team on the question how the brand can activate or stand for some of the well-being dimensions of Renee's framework, and how can we activate that? How can we bring that to life? And there were projects. One was the most famous and most, the one I'm most proud of was that we have a product. It's called Hugs. If you translate, it's a biscuit and it looks like a hug. And we developed a special packaging for the nurses of the COVID time. And we dedicated our hugs, free to the Italian nurses to thank the nurses for all the outstanding work they were doing. And this went super viral, and it was just amazing how the brand just showed a gesture of caring in a moment that was very, very difficult for everybody. And it was not only for people out there, it was impactful, but also for the team itself, because working on that and developing such a nice initiative, of course, generated a lot of pride and also hope in a way.
Yeah. So I love that you say we started with me, we went to our team, and then we went to the brand. Renee gave me a case study that was written on this. And there's something that says, Julia, that you believe that a brand is a mirror of the people who work on it. So there's this direct relationship of thriving to the actual brand that an organization is bringing to life. And I'm curious, listening to you, Julia, talk about how much that did for the brand. Renee, what were the steps and how did you co-create with Julia to help bring this to life for individuals, the team, and the brand? What are the steps? Or I know it's not a 1, 2, 3, here you are, 8 easy steps or whatever, but just a little bit more context of what are the steps to get there, to get to something like Julia's talking about. This brand comes to life because of the people.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the principles we hold in any project, any kind of transformational work, like what Julia was not only asking for, but up for, is to make sure whatever is designed has work included in it. So we're interested in helping people build new awarenesses and new capabilities while they are accomplishing work. So it's rare for us to do a project where we would just be talking about the me and the we, me and the team that Julia mentioned. We always are trying to look for, and what is the work this team needs to accomplish anyway, so that this project helps them accomplish that work, but do so in a way that they now have brand new insights about the science and practices of thriving individually and collectively. So that's a design principle that I would say for the last 25 years, it's just core. Because then the reason that's the case is because then it's integrated. Then when people finish the project, they've also integrated, besides getting certain results that they needed to get anyway, they've also now integrated new ways of thinking and new behaviors, new ways of interacting into how they work. And so it's not disconnected. Unlike, I used to run a wellness wellness department for a global IT company many, many, many years ago. And although I think I loved doing that work and I loved that function, the wellness programming was always separate from the actual business of the organization. So with this design principle, it makes conversations about well-being, about thriving, about stress resilience, about growth, fully integrated into how we get work done and how we achieve results. So I would say that was one design principle. Another design principle was whole person learning. So how do we, throughout the process, engage, this is not just an intellectual exercise, but this is engaging people's hearts. This is getting people to move, so engaging their bodies. So, we had everything from breath work to movement practices to getting out in nature. Getting out in nature actually ended up being a really big one, if I remember, Julia, because of COVID. We were all isolated, and all of us, by the way, Renelle, it wasn't just Julia's team that was isolated. All of us were isolated.
Right. Yeah.
So being able to work together and have a partner with Julia was, our team, I'll speak for myself, but I could speak for our team. We also gained energy and well-being and a sense of meaning in the middle of like a crazy making time by being able to work with a team that really wanted to ask these different questions about what does thriving mean to me individually? What does it mean for us to thrive together in such a difficult time? And how can our brand be an agent of thriving for our consumers? So those were the three core questions. Yeah. So whole person learning, really making it as experiential as possible. Another principle was clear sponsorship. So you, Julia, yourself, your ability to be a role model, to be someone who is such a servant leader, to really have the team in mind and be holding that and stewarding that was absolutely critical, because you were talking with people every day and to be able to step up. So that was another core principle. As far as the steps, it was a 5-month journey, and upfront was as a kickoff and some initial assessment work. So the kickoff, so everyone knew what they were getting themselves into.
Can I ask a quick question? And then we'll go back into the steps, but I'm curious, you talked about some of the design principles, the sponsorship, the nature, the movement, and this was during COVID, but just because it was during COVID, we still have a lot of remote work environments. So Julia, I'm curious from you, how did you bring those design principles to life? And then we'll go to some of the steps. But how did you get into nature together? How did you do the movement? How, as a sponsor, what was that like for you during COVID? And you're working across borders, right? And your team is international as well. So just bring that to life just a little bit more for us.
Yeah, the movement and the nature was in the first phase where we could just not come together was just giving incentives to each of the team to get out whenever they could, just to walk around the house or whatever was possible, or to have a walk in the forest. And then we shared the experience. In a later phase, it was possible again to meet physically, at least outside, not in rooms, but we have a park in the city where we were and we met. And that was amazing when for the first time we got together again. Still with the mask and everything, but we were there and came with bikes and running and whatever. So yeah, and then we did some movement even inside in our homes, very often guided by Renee, who told us about some exercises that we could do together, even online, and it was also fun. So there are ways to do that in a quite simple way.
And for someone that might be skeptical of this type of investment in the workplace, why is that an important investment? Why is that an important investment for the actual brand and the results that are trying to be achieved?
Well, I think when you have goals in a company, in a business, today you need a lot of creativity, you need a lot of energy, you need a lot of resilience, again, because things are so strongly and quickly changing. And to get to those results, it's not about simple technical skills anymore. I mean, those technical skills are everywhere. You can hire people and you can even do it with technology today, partly. But if you don't have the creativity and the open-mindedness and the exchange between people, which enriches the discussion and brings even better results, even more ideas, even more energy in the business, it's impossible to reach that, I think. If there's not a healthy human factor, I don't think you can survive honestly in today's environment.
Yeah. So that's what we mean by bringing our whole self to work is, so much of it is like, oh, we're stuck. And so let's get more rational and logical and put more goals in place. And what we're saying here, and we're showing the results, is that we bring our whole self, our whole body. We bring our heart, we bring our head, we bring our soul, our essence. And that is what creates new results. Is in essence of what we're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Renelle, one thing I would add to what Julia is saying is you also want people to be leaders themselves.
yeah.
So if from a management perspective, Julia was obviously the senior manager, but in today's world where people are working still, many people have remote teams or hybrid teams. We've got constant changes occurring. We want every person to feel like they can make decisions. They can think for the team. They can check in. They feel responsible for the health and the trust and the performance of the team. So each one of us, it's not about just following. So that shift that we were talking about at the very beginning of our conversation, from shifting from a more reactive orientation to one where we step in and we say, well, I can affect change here. I can lead.
Yeah.
I don't have to have the title of manager to step in and to notice how we're doing and to really be a leader here. I think that's another shift that's super important, that everyone can be a leader. But we can easily say that, but to actually demonstrate it and live it is what Julia's team was really doing. They were really taking responsibility, not just for themselves, but for each other.
I think there's one more thing when it comes to, you talked about cost and, investment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true, you have an investment, but it's also true that when this work works, then it becomes contagious, because in fact, that is what happened afterwards. We started with that project and that was just my team. I mean, it was a lot of people, but it was just a team. And then people around me, including my manager, my direct manager, got curious about it and said, what are you doing with your team? And I want to know more. And it's honestly was not the first person I would have told about it. And then he engaged and he said, let's do that with the leadership too, with the leadership of the region, the leadership team. And we did another project. So, and their second line did it also. So it spread and then it becomes in a way contagious. So I think it's not just about, counting the investment for the kickoff. And of course you need to invest something, but then when it spreads, it becomes really a cultural impact in the company.
Yeah. And I hear you saying too, start somewhere. Yes, it'd be great if the entire organization kicked off something really big, but there's something actually really special about maybe it starts somewhere in the organization and then it spreads from there. And that might even, we could argue it could be maybe a better way to do it. I don't know, because there's a small group that really creates the contagion that you talked about. Yeah. So a little bit more about the practical steps that you went through. Renee, you started talking about that, but I just wanted to give people a flavor of like, this isn't just something that you just say, okay, we're going to bring well-being and wholeness into the organization. Here we go. There's some work to be done.
Exactly. And it's also not, this approach is not as programmatic in that you have a very set program and it always works this way, because everything, like Julia mentioned at the beginning, was really tailored to what's going on with her group. There's some principles that we use consistently over and over and over that I mentioned, but we were, my team, Julia, and her whole team were really receptive to what's actually happening with her group, and that is a foundation. So that was the assessment work up front. So we used the Be Well, Lead Well Pulse assessment to look at different biopsychosocial factors of thriving, of growth, of stress resilience, and how the team was currently doing. We used that at the beginning, and then we had 5 months of group work together. Okay. But we decided to also use Be Well, Lead Well Pulse as a measurement tool 1 year later to be able to say, have these changes, what changes have happened? What can we measure that's changed? And have the changes stuck? I mean, often, you do an event somewhere, you do a leadership transformation event, and the event is wonderful, and there's lots of good camaraderie and juju that people are really feeling with each other, but you go back to work and nothing really sticks. So we really wanted to know what has shifted and what has stuck with this group, what's been sustainable. During the 5 months of work, we had 7 2-hour team sessions over those 5 months. So they were happening about every 3-ish weeks or so. And of course, because of COVID, they were all over Zoom. Not just COVID, but people were in different locations. Mm-hmm. So they were all over Zoom. And those sessions really focused on, at first, as Julia mentioned, how are you doing personally, and what are some tools and practices for your own thriving that you could start to use. And then they started to shift to, okay, now in the middle of COVID, we can't see each other in the way, be at the coffee cooler or, the water cooler or the coffee maker with each other. We can't be in the cafeteria with each other and have those conversations as we reinvent ourselves as a team and how we work together. How will we do that? And so they had conversations about that. And then it morphed into, well, our work as a team, we're a brand team, is to look at how can our brand support our consumers during this difficult time. If we're having a difficult time, so are our consumers. And so then the conversation was really more strategically about that. And then they implemented, as Julia mentioned, that campaign toward nurses. They also implemented some really cool commercials around happiness and generosity and connection, how consumers could really connect with one another in a new way. So it was super gratifying for us to see what was coming out of the team. So those were the big major steps, and then measuring it at the very end.
I think I heard both of you say something like, yes, there's a process, and there's also what I would call a dance of when you are bringing people's heart and essence out, their creativity out. You don't actually know what's going to come out of that, but you're going to get something surprising and something more by unleashing the wholeness of a human. Would that be a fair way to say?
For sure. It's always a dance. And it is always about when you're shifting from this more reactive mode, like we have to react to this crisis that we're in, and it's so stressful and we feel a lot of anxiety, and you're channeling that energy into unleashing that as potential for new innovation, for creativity. That's the shift that's happening. And that's the shift that I absolutely 180% trust that happens with people when given the right environment. I've just seen it too many times, but you never know what's going to come out of that process when that unleashing occurs. You don't know what connections people are going to make, what innovations they're going to come up with. That's, to me, the real fulfilling part. That's the point.
The magic
of leading is the magic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Julia,
also think
yeah.
one very interesting thing is that people are never at the same stage when you start the process. There are some that are super ready, they were maybe just waiting for an opportunity like that to engage and to self-develop and to open up, etc. And then you have the skeptical people who, especially in the beginning, are like, oh, I don't want to, get into personal stuff, etc. And then sometimes you have the surprise that the most skeptical people become the biggest fans of the program and vice versa. So it's also orchestrating the people that are in different stages and are more or less ready to engage in the beginning. So it's fascinating to see how it evolves.
Yeah. I would add another principle because of what you just said, Julia, that is consistently a principle of our work, and you so role modeled it. And that is, this is an invitation. We're not trying to force people to change. This is an invitation. And we're going to be talking about the brand now. You are invited to be a part of this conversation. We're going to be having opportunities for you to go deeper into what's going on with you right now. How stressed are you? How might you deal with that stress? You're invited to do that, but it's not, people aren't showing up because of compliance. They really feel invited. And I think that spirit, which, from a wisdom work standpoint, we can design those kinds of environments, but you have to have a leader like Julia who also stewards it. And, because she's the leader, she's the manager of the group and really role models it. And I appreciated that. Julia was on the journey just like everybody else. She wasn't saying, okay, WisdomWorks has created a journey for you all, and I'll just stay right here and wait to see what you all come up with. She was on it with everyone else, and it really role modeled for all of the people. This is, we can do this. We can do this. Yeah. This is truly an invitation.
I think that makes such a difference too there's an accountability that you're part of this team and that you're present. And at the same time, I invite your skepticism in. Mm-hmm. And I see that all the time. And it's a lot of times, the ones that ask the hardest questions are the most skeptical, end up having so much to teach all of us too, and become some of the greatest champions, and sometimes not. Yeah. And the other thing that you talked about is having a leader on the journey with you. And I think that is just critical. And you said something earlier, and Julia, I want to ask you, Renee called you a servant leader. And I would say a servant leader is also what I would call a conscious leader. As a servant, what does that mean to you, Julia, when you hear Renee say you're a servant leader, and how are you continuing to develop yourself? And what does that mean, and how does that transform the business?
Well, for me, a servant leader is someone who leads not for the sake of leading, but for the sake of developing people, of understanding people, of seeing them grow and change and ask questions. And what comes out in terms of business results and so on is almost an automatic response. So it's not leading for the ABC, KPI, etc. I mean, that is, of course, that's why what we are paid for. But I think it's actually an automatic result when you have a working team, when everybody has the mission clear, when everybody knows the priorities, when people listen to each other, when creativity can flow. So that's for me a servant leader, someone who creates an environment and this where this can happen. Yeah. And for me, it's the most beautiful part of my job, more than looking at market shares, etc., which I do, of course, and I'm happy when they grow. But I'm more happy when someone in my team is promoted to a new job or is proud of a new project or something.
I love that. So, I could talk all day about this work with you all, and I'm guessing that there are people listening that would love to hear more. So this is just a preview. So I'll put lots of information about both of you in the show notes. But in conclusion, as we end this short conversation on such a really important topic, what would you say to a leader or an organization that hasn't yet made this investment in people, in themselves? And what would you say to them to why might leading with vitality, what we call this wellness at the helm, why might you make that investment? What haven't we talked about that would be good for another leader, another organization to hear?
I think the question is that we need to ask leaders is, do you think, considering all the tensions, the changes, the shifts in our world, your people are ready and thriving enough to face the next chapter of your organization? Then if the answer is yes, lucky him or her. But I guess that most people might say, maybe not completely. Mm-hmm. And then that's where you start the discussion.
Yeah, same. I would say the exact same thing. Do you as a leader, are you feeling internally well resourced to be able to step up to this really uncertain future, because it is uncertain, and to really create the results you want to create in the middle of it? And can you lead in such a way that supports others in feeling more capable, more resourced themselves to deal with all the complexities? And I think for most leaders, if most leaders are going so fast that they haven't paused to answer that or to even ask that question, they don't know that's a question. But if they hear this and they ask that question, I think just what Julia said, that most people would say, no, the truth is I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball all the time. I'm just running as fast as I can. Yeah. So that is a shift.
I think there's also one very simple advice that works well, which is try yourself. Like, I started to ask Renee for this program because I had worked with her on myself. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to be part of another group where I came in contact with Wisdom Works and with the Be Well, Lead Well framework. And this work touched me personally so much that I thought, well, this is something that I think can benefit also my team, and why not also the brand? And the same happened with my direct manager. When I told him about this whole thing, then we said, well, let's first work with him, and he would do the assessment, and he had his coaching with Renee. And that's when he said, wow, there was something interesting, and I think that should be extended to my team. So I think there's always a trigger on a known experience that then you want to, open up to your team and to your people. Back again to the contagious character of well-being. But I think that can be a nice advice. Try yourself. Invest 2-3 hours of time just for yourself without directly, going with huge programs. Try yourself. Think about yourself, and then you can.
Yeah, then you can grow it from there. I always, in my, one of my, quotes that I say is, we need to heal ourselves before we heal our systems. Exactly. And so they aren't mutually exclusive, but one definitely feeds the other. And so I thank you both for reinforcing that and for leading the way and being the change as we move forward in this world, for helping us remember and helping leaders remember that we can thrive and how we can thrive, and that there is another way to do this, and that results still come. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I will put your contact information for and Renee, more about Wisdom Works in the show notes. But I am so delighted that you were both able to join us today. And again, my heartfelt thanks not only for being on this episode, but for really leading the way and change that we need to make in the world.
Well, Renelle, thank you too for amplifying. Because you're using your podcast, and I know you've created it. It's an expression of you, and you're using it to really amplify a different way of leading in the world, a better way of leading, and our world really needs it. So thank you for doing that and inviting us to be a part of this.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, absolutely. For more information, visit insight-cc.com or email us at info@insight-cc.com. We look forward to hearing from you.